All right. Welcome, everyone. We're going to give just one more minute as all the attendees are now pouring in. Thank you for being with us. And again, we'll start in 1 minute. This is a little bit of a sound check. Make sure you can see my screen, which you can't do anything about that, but I just wanted to mention that you should be able to see my screen. And then, like I said, there's the participants are pouring in right now. So we're going to give just one more minute so that everybody can join us. And then we will get started. And you should see my mouth moving. And then you should hear something. And if you can't, then it's on your side. It's not me. All right. Looks like everybody, we'll give another 15, 20 seconds just so that people can come in. Thank you for joining us this morning. Little sound check, and you should be able to see my screen that says automation selectors that suck less. We're going to use that word as much as we can today. It's Chris's goal to say that at least 10 times, I think. And then we're glad to have Chris here. Hey, we are ready to start, but I see that the number of attendees are going up quite dramatically still. So we're going to hold off again just for a little bit longer, just so that everybody can join us. Thank you to Zoom technology for allowing this to happen and to let us know that people are still joining. All right, and it looks like it has at least slowed down. So we will get started. Welcome, everyone. We are very excited to welcome everyone today, wherever and whenever you may be joining us to our webinar from Test AI, Automation Selectors That Suck Less. And I have just a few things to cover before we get to the main event. So a little bit of housekeeping, an introduction, and then we will be off to the presentation, and we will have a Q&A at the end, and then we will do a raffle at the end as well for those of you who are aware. For those of you who are not aware, exciting news. All right, so housekeeping real quick. This webinar is being recorded. All attendees have been muted and cameras are turned off unless you are Chris or myself. And if you want to submit a question, you should see the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And if you don't see that, then you need to go Google search how to find the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen for Zoom. And then you can submit questions to us throughout. We will be taking questions as they're relevant during the presentation. Chris said that I can interrupt him as rudely as I want. And he would be so kind and very nice to me when I interrupt him, and he'll answer those questions at the appropriate time. Or if we feel like it would just be better to wait till the end and disrupt the flow, then we'll hold those to the end. So don't feel like we've forgotten you. We'll get to your questions as long as we have enough time to cover those questions. Let's see. Automation selectors that suck less. We are excited to discuss this topic, but real quick, I wanted to mention at the end of the presentation, as stated before, we will have a Q&A, but also the raffle will be somewhere in the middle of the Q&A, maybe after the Q&A, depending on how upbeat and excited Chris is about the Q&A. We may not be able to stop him for a raffle, but somewhere in there, we'll do a raffle for a Nintendo Switch Lite. You are automatically entered into that drawing by being here and remaining to the end. If you ditch us before, I'm sorry, you won't be eligible for the Nintendo Switch Lite. All right, I'm going to do a quick introduction of Chris. I have now known Chris for quite some time. I don't really keep track of how long I've known people, but it's over a year now, and so that's a really long time in the technology world. And Chris previously worked at some big companies, Google, Microsoft, Dropbox, And he's made all of our lives better and worse because he's responsible in part for Google Ads. And so we thank Chris for providing lots of money for all of our companies and for stealing all of our money and contributing that to Google. Chris also likes dogs and has a dog, and he has invited his dog to join him every once in a while during this presentation. So if you hear a dog barking, then it's probably Chris's. And the dog is very familiar with AI and ML and may chime in and provide some more information for us. Let's see, we are going to let Chris take over the screen and start his presentation momentarily. And while he's taking over the screen, we're going to start a little poll. This is the first time that we've done this, so we've made it super challenging, and we're only going to give you 10 seconds to respond to each question. So those questions are about to appear on your screen. And when they do, you'll have about 10 seconds. There you go. First question. Do you think automation selectors suck? This is a trick question. If you get it wrong, you may be kicked off of the webinar. Just kidding. All right, so there you go. That was it. That was your 10 seconds. If you didn't believe me, the person in charge of the poll has a timer, and it is a very fast timer. All right, question number 2. Quickly put in your answer. What framework are you using? Selenium, Appium, Cypress, or something else? And I invite you to join our Discord channel, which we will put up on the screen later again. And if you want to suggest another framework that you think Chris should add the SDK to, then that would be great. All right, and our third and final question, what language are you using? And this is, by the way, is not a speaking language. If you're speaking in Java, Python, or JavaScript, there's counseling for that. But this would be, hopefully you're thinking about automation. And of course, you have the option for other. All right, and now we're going to see some quick results to the poll. Do you think automation selectors suck? Yes, 83%. 17% said no. Unfortunately, our webinar was just reduced by 17%. No, I'm just kidding. But thank you for the response. That was kind of a sucker question. And then, what framework are you using? And this is awesome, actually. If we could, I don't know if everybody can see the poll results, so I'm just going to let you know. Selenium 52%, Appium 5%, Cypress 2%, and other 40%, which is, I think that's pretty cool that there's a lot of other frameworks that are getting used at this point in time. So awesome. Okay, and then what language are you using? Java 33%, Python 18%, JavaScript 15%, and other 33%. Again, if you're using an other language, feel free to chime in and let Chris know what other languages you want support for. And yeah, thank you for the responses on the poll. And we turn the time over to Chris. And Chris, I assume you're muted, and so you'll want to double check that before you start talking.
Print, double quote. Thank you, Kevin. End quote. Enter. So yeah, thanks everyone for taking the time. I don't think we'll use the full hour, but I know everyone's really here for the Wii, and so we'll or the Switch, and so we'll try and get through this. But wanted to kind of walk everyone through what we've been working on here at Test AI lately, which is our Test AI SDK, among a few other things. And so the main reason why we're doing this is testing just needs AI. I think everyone here who's worked at a company for a couple months, couple of years has probably seen this, where the complexity of features just keeps increasing. But the time that you can take to write tests is not increasing at that same rate. It's more linear. Worse than that too, it tends to be more logarithmic, where as you write more test cases, the burden of just maintaining those test cases starts to stall out. There's a good post on Medium by Jason Arbin, one of our co-founders, about basically the half-life of a test case, covering all the stuff that happens of as your test suite grows, just the maintenance cost grows with it. And so there's two main reasons why selectors break, or why automation is like, if I could talk. The first one is just the selectors themselves break. So this can be a number of reasons. You could have things like A/B experiments going on, or the developers do their thing and they develop. But at any rate, they break that selector, and maybe they see it, maybe they don't. And then suddenly the automation is either flaky or just broken. You can also have things where the flows or the screens changes. So, Uber's infamous for this, where, they're constantly running experiments on their application. If anyone's ever used Uber, every time you log in, you see a different, screen here, screen there. They're just trying out all this sort of different stuff. And so those sort of things happen. It can be, temporal, like, oh, there's a sale, it's a pop-up, or it could be, just, hey, an entire new flow for one reason or the other. But those are the main two reasons why automation breaks. Obviously, there's a plethora of other things, small things like infrastructure, et cetera, but those tend to be very minor and have been more or less figured out by a lot of automation teams and companies. So how we're trying to change this at Test AI is we're actually building image-based selectors. So what that means is we're not looking at the page source. We're not looking at, the DOM structure. All we care about is fundamentally what an end user would see, a screenshot. And so that means then any element that you want to contribute to and teach the bot how to learn that element, you can just drag and drop it, but it's over pixels. It doesn't have to be, a bounding box that can have, something partially covering it or some other weird oddity of that. And so what we find is, hey, if your end user can still see it and interact with it, your automation should probably be able to execute and do the same. It shouldn't matter that a developer changed a resource ID or something under the hood, and now your automation breaks. That doesn't give a good signal, because ultimately automation is meant to give a signal of the quality of the application. So what is the Test AI SDK? So it's a free SDK. Right now we have Java and Python for Appium and Selenium. So I saw a question about if this is web or mobile. It's both. We'll be adding more languages and more frameworks as we go, but we're just kind of getting started and getting ramped up. So there's two main value props to this. The first one is it will back up your automation, and that does it automatically. So what that does, or what that means, is when your selectors fail, you have an existing automation suite, you had 2 lines of Python code or 2 lines of Java code. Now, anytime that selector fails to find the item, there's a fallback mode where Test AI kicks in and says, hey, all right, the selector can't find it. That resource ID isn't there, what have you. So then it'll just back off and say, let's try Test AI. Could an end user be able to see this? If yes, then it returns that element, and then the test can go on. There's no training required. It just ingests in your test case automatically and builds those for you. So it's a no cost to you, both in terms of time and money. And then the other aspect is we have a visual only selector, which I was showed a little GIF of earlier. What that does is if you're building new test cases and you don't want to like dig into the page source, look for, what is this element? How do I make it unique? Get that one, get to the next screen and continue on that way. We have a way that you can do that all through a nice web UI, which I'll show you. It also integrates very nicely into existing scripts or test suites that you may have. So it's easy to talk, but I think it tends to be best if we just jump into a demo. So what we'll do is we'll get set up. Feel free if you want to go along with us as well. So you can go to test.ai/SDK. You'll be presented with this screen. You can kind of learn more about where we're going, things like that. But we'll just go ahead and sign up. So I'll do Chris plus live demo at test.ai. Oops, click sign up. Chris plus. Create password and log in. So this is on the back end, just creating a bunch of a test suite, or not a test suite, but a free area for all of your assets that you'll do, setting up the database, things like that. And so you're presented here with just some quick setup guides. So if you want to see how to install it, if you want to see what to add to your code in Python or Java, if you want to just get started real quickly with a test case. So we'll go through all of this. The key pieces here is you have your API key, which is just copyable. You can also see, we'll go through these a little bit later, but we have a full tutorial and a full documentation page if you want to jump in here. But let's just go ahead and get started with this first command here. So we'll copy this, we will go to our code and we'll just first start by installing Test AI. Boom, that's fast. So now here I have my existing Selenium test case. It just goes to google.com. We'll look for an input field. Just to show you that this works. Actually, I will just, for the sake of time, I'll copy this. So now we'll add Test AI in. So, oops. All right, we'll get that one fixed. Dictionary. Good. All right. We'll just add these 3 lines. So we're going to import the Test AI module. We'll add our API key. This is the same API key as up here. And then we're going to overload our driver, pass in our driver and our API key. Fundamentally, then the driver has all the same methods as we had before, but now we have this backup selector mode enabled. So this is the first time we've run this. So we'll just go ahead and do the first one. Boom. Oh, dang. Well, bah humbug. So let me just jump to terminal then. I think it's a weird oddity with this one. 1 second, I apologize.
Chris, while you're taking a look at that, we have a question that I'll go ahead and take a stab at. The question is there any best advice to get started with your tool or automation in general? And there's a lot of advice out there. When it comes to any tool, the advice that I've been giving recently is you know how to test everybody. In fact, if you're not a tester, you're always testing an app. So just imagine 3 common use cases for whichever app you'd like to test and use those as your test cases. And then go learn how to automate those 3 test cases with whatever tool it is that you want to use. And that will get you started. I think too often people turn it into, we need this cool best practice. We need to be able to do this other thing. And the reality is just pick your top 3 test cases and get started. And that's even a good way to test, a test case management tool or anything else that's out there in testing. Does this work for the test cases that I have? All right, because are you ready now, or do you want me to take another question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's really good advice. And yeah, so yeah, I don't know if you saw while we're answering, but we also executed this test case, which will enter my first test case. It will then search for that, and then it will go ahead and click the clear button on that. And so now that we've done that, Test AI has ingested this test case. So if you go back here, you can see we're training classifiers for you in the background. We also have your test case. You can click and see each of these elements. So this is the first element, which is the input box. We also can show you what we see as the clear button. And all this, again, is done with no manual inputs, no extra time added. So now if we just re-execute this test case, it still works, but we know if anything changes on this Google website, it will still execute. But yeah, that's the kind of first backup thing of just getting that started. So we'll finish that to let that execute real quick. I do see that there's another question too of if there's a paid version, what other features will the paid version have? Kevin, do you want to take that?
Yeah. So with Test AI, if you first off, it's free, so you can go ahead and download Test AI Carbon, which is our UI client, or as Chris is talking about today, our SDK. Both free. Go ahead and get started. And the free version is a fully fledged version. The difference is your data, your elements and screens and such will be uploaded to the Test AI servers, and that will be used to improve our AI. If you're like, I don't want you to do that, then you can pay. And you can upgrade for $1,000 a year, and that will allow you to control what data is uploaded to our servers. And then, of course, there's always those who need additional support or training or whatever. And so we have an enterprise option as well. and you can go ahead and contact us. Again, the reason that enterprise doesn't have pricing is not because we're afraid of it. It's just everybody has their own situation. So contact us and we'll get you set up with the enterprise pricing as well. So again, free SDK or Carbon, and that's included in your license. And then Pro, $1,000 a year, and that includes the SDK and Carbon for that $1,000. And then Enterprise, come talk to us.
And then, yeah, there was a follow-up question as well on what kind of data is collecting. And what we're collecting is just the element names and the data that is being sent to the server. So screenshots and element identification. So in this particular example, you know, that there is a clear button that you're interacting with. That's an X. And the main reason that we're collecting that is then we want to bring that data back. So we take this data, anonymize it, and use it for training. And that training is, we'll talk about a little bit later of the value, but essentially we're going to be building generic test cases so you can just build quick generic test cases, things like automating search. So instead of having to manually type in, find the input field, search for this, you can just say, tell the AI bot, find a search field and insert this in one command, and it will automatically handle all the actions for you. And so that's where that data collection piece is. If you upgrade to the paid model, though, we do not collect any data from those users unless they opt into it. And that's the kind of the trade-off.
One more quick question. Yes, the answer to how much is it? It's $1,000 per user per year if you upgrade to the professional.
Cool, Kevin. It looks like there's a couple questions.
Yeah, you can go ahead with those questions if you want to. I was going to let you keep running, but if you want to pause for some questions, we can totally do that.
Sure. Since Test AI uses image-based selectors, can it be used to automate tests for native Windows desktop applications? In other words, non-browser testing. So 100% it can be used for that. We have in addition to the SDK, we have a codeless solution, which you can do that out of the box today. As of right now, we only support Selenium and Appium with the coded solution, but it's cool that it's on a roadmap that I'll be showing off, but we will be adding support to API support. So you can add this in if you have existing automation, or it's on a roadmap to add in Windows automation, because again, it's image-based. So we don't care if it's, you know, a phone, a tablet, a web page, you know, Windows or Mac application, heck, even an Xbox. We can kind of do all of that. And so we do a lot of those today with the Test AI Carbon. It's our download edition for our no-code, low-code solution, but SDK is just coming out, so we're working to get feature parity on that. Is this tool compatible for native mobile applications? 100%. It works the exact same way. Online on our GitHub page right here, you can see documentation and demos for running this on Appium. So I think we have a few images here showing, like, you know, this working on the Wikipedia page. You can do the same sort of thing of, you know, selecting a skip button, things like that. Functionally, it all works the exact same, which is awesome. How to handle tables in web page. So tables and web pages are handled the kind of same exact way. It will, if you have selectors, we'll still back those up. Otherwise, it'll look at that particular table icon. So if it is image only and they all look the same, it might not be the greatest for it right now. And then we're working to help it identify what makes that table unique. Feel free to play with it. It should theoretically work. It looks for the most common element that is on the page that looks and is in about the same spot as your existing one. So if all of your elements or all of your table icons look the same, we'd be able to say, okay, well, I see, you know, 10 of these instances. What's the one that's closest to where I was before? We have another question, which is, how do you use the image selector as the primary selector to deal with Canvas interactions like Pixie.js or monolithic HTML? Perfect question. Let me jump into that one right now, because that was what I wanted to show next, which is if you do an AI-first version. So that is the wrong thing I did not want to open. Alt tab is my friend. So what we'll do here is the same thing. So we'll just go ahead and make an AI first one. So this is the same code more or less as before. So we have our Selenium driver. We have our API key. We overload the driver. But now using the test AI driver, we have this additional method called find by element name. And so what that element name is basically it's just a human readable name. And that human readable name is then going to be useful for however you want to use it, but it's used. That makes no sense. I've had too many coffees. So it's basically just a human readable name to tell you what that element is. So here we're going to the search box. We're going to find the search box and we're going to clear it. Now, because Test AI has not seen this page with this name before, it doesn't know what a search box is. It just, you can see it only knows that there's a element name XPath with a span of clear. What instead we're going to do is we'll go back to the tutorial. And so we'll first start by doing an interactive mode since this is a new test case. So this is a bonus feature thanks to a guy named Alec on our team who put this in, but we now have a way to make this interactive. So with this interactive mode, what this is going to do when we're creating a new test case is now if test AI doesn't know what this element looks like or can't find it on a page, it'll launch a web browser. So we'll do that. So again, we've not seen these selectors before. So we'll launch this. Now test AI is looking for an element named search box. It hasn't seen a search box before. So what's going to do is take a screenshot. It'll then open up this web page, which I thought it would go here to the one I'm logged into. We'll select a search box. You see it then executes that. Now it is looking for the clear button, but it won't know what the clear button is, so it'll do the same action. So again, it's processing the page, trying to identify it. Probably should have just logged into this window. Sorry, I'm using an incognito window, so it makes it a little bit harder. We'll go ahead and tell it, yep, here's the clear box. We'll bounce back and we'll see it clear out this test case. And so what we're doing is we're just training the AI bot to say, here in the pixels, it's this element on the screen is the clear button. And so what's cool about this, it doesn't matter if it's, like an HTML5 canvas element, it doesn't matter if it's a, on a mobile Unity application or something like that. It works purely at the pixel level. And so it learns under the hood, this group of pixels is this thing. And so a lot of people ask, well, what about, isn't this just template matching? And the thing with template matching is template matching one is very scale invariant. So if you run this test case now on an ultra wide, it'll fail, or a different screen density, it will fail. Another thing too is it's more of a fuzzy matcher, right? So right now, for instance, this is Google dark mode. If it goes Google in a light mode on your browser, if you were to execute this test case, that X button still looks like an X. It's still in the generally the same location of the screen. However, it's going to be a white background with a black X, and so that makes it a lot harder to find. And so using the AI first approach, it can actually find it in a more generic way. So then it doesn't matter if you have things like a shopping cart with 0 items, 1 item, 2 item, etc. It still finds it. The third kind of interesting piece of this is now you can write a test case with a selector, and you could run the same exact test case on that we built on web. You could run it on Appium using mobile web, or you could even use it if you want on, say the Google native app, and it will learn, it doesn't know what platform it's on, it just looks at the pixels and says, what's the most likely thing that's a clear button and a search box. And Google makes their search boxes and clear buttons all look the same. So it's a great way to write a test case once and reuse it across multiple different test frameworks and different test scripts. So if we go here, you can then see that, cool, we are training a bunch of different classifiers automatically, and those are all kicked off. So we finished our search box and the clear button is trained. Cool. So that is test AI. I'm going to just go quickly back. I think that hopefully answers your question, Stephen, on Canvas and those selectors. Not anonymous. Based on your simple Google use case, you have trained the AI to recognize the X icon as a clear button, but in many applications, it is a close button. How does the AI resolve ambiguity like this? So the AI doesn't resolve it. You would have to resolve it. So if you have a close button and a clear button, you would just have to label them differently. So I use the word label, but basically teach the bot that those buttons are different. This is similar if you have a new software engineer joining your team and you're trying to tell them, what the difference of an X on a search icon is versus an X somewhere else. We keep the training sets different. So, if essentially you'd have to have a clear button on a page that has an X for it to probably matter, just to be realistic on that. But even then, like I was saying, the classifier learns, okay, if there's multiple X's, what one is closer to where I was on that page before. Where does the data live if I use the SDK? For clarification, if I use the Carbon app, I can view the crawled elements in the editor tab. If I'm using the SDK, where's the view elements that have been discovered by test AI? So the elements are all on the website. So once you log into sdk.test.ai, all of the elements and all of that data lives on our cloud instance. And so you can go in and view that at any time. You can even do things like, if you want to change, for instance, the clear button, it's actually a little bit bigger. You can just drag, do a new one, and that will re-kick off a training instance. How about the translation testing? So again, test AI is very generic. So it doesn't have to worry about what language you're using. It's all kind of image-based. And so it learns things in a more abstract way. So similar to how any of us could probably look at, Google in a different language and kind of figure it out, or many applications in many languages, even if you don't speak it, kind of generally get a sense of it. And that's how test AI works as well, using the visual first classifiers. This tool supports parallel execution, multi-browser testing, 100%. So we don't interfere with anything that you would do in terms of execution. It fits right into your Selenium, Appium test automation scripts. So if your scripts execute today in parallel, we don't interfere with that. We have a Kubernetes cluster set up so it auto scales with demand. With enterprise support, we plan to support things like, deploying this on your instances, or, keeping a reserved set of instances for just your tests if you want to have ultra low latency on those. How different is test AI if we compare it with custom frameworks that would build around Selenium or Appium, something like hybrid data-driven or keyword-driven? I think fundamentally it would depend on the framework. Many of the frameworks that I've seen out there today base all their stuff around selectors, right? So you still have selectors at the end of the day. So it's keyword-driven selectors that are fundamentally the same problems as before, right? So some of them will just say, okay, what are given the state today of this clear button, what are 4 unique selectors or something, right, that exist? But if Google was to change all their applications to say something like React, then all their existing selectors would break. Test AI is different in that it uses the visual only components. So it doesn't matter what happens under the hood. It just matters at the UI layer. And so it gives you kind of that best of both worlds, because essentially then the only time that they break is if, there's an entire rewrite and the application looks so different that a user would arguably say it's very different, then test AI breaks and your selectors break. But in that case, that tends to be incredibly rare that a company would do a massive rewrite like that. So The benefit in that scenario, just kind of going down that, is Test AI can bridge that gap. So if you now have, say, 2 versions of your app, your old one and your new one, Test AI breaks on this new one, say it's running on a local developer environment, it can basically learn that these things are the same. So you change the shopping button to a bag and changes colors and things like that. So it looks different under the hood, it's different code. You can basically train Test AI and say, hey, a shopping cart can either be an actual cart or a bag. And it will learn that, okay, now it's a bag or a cart, and I can understand it can be either, but it's going to be called a shopping cart in this test. So that's the extra benefit of Test AI, is it can grow with your data. So it's pixel match and not dependent on where it is on the page. More or less, yes. I mean, it's not an exact pixel match, but it looks at it from the UI component. It doesn't have a location selector. Now that said, if the location or an exact pixel match is what you want, there are tools like Apply tools that will do exact pixel match and location based things. You also can just call the XY coordinates, or you have all of the same element properties as an existing Selenium and Appium element. We're not doing anything special in that regard. So you will be able to just grab those, and you can make a verification after that. So say, find this element, verify it's, in the top right or to the right of the text, my first AI test, things like that. Is it verify, download, and upload file? I'm not 100% sure I understand that one. I don't know, Kevin, if
I'm not sure if they're just asking, like in an application, if you could verify that a file was uploaded or downloaded. Maybe you could answer that. And then if that's not correct, then we can go ahead and they can post another question.
Okay. Yeah, we don't do any verifications for downloads. Most of the frameworks already support that stuff, and we don't get in the way. Again, we wrap the existing framework, and then your driver still has all the same exact methods. So we don't do anything special with those yet. And there's a lot of example codes on kind of verifying uploads and downloads. I can talk kind of some of the future stuff that we're looking at, which maybe helps a little bit with some of those, but we don't do it today. Is there any change in the previously captured image example text box? How to handle it with Test AI, how changes can be modified? I think I talked a little bit about this, of just, like the shopping cart example. It can grow and change as you add more data, more examples. I think the best way that I like to think of it, that makes a lot of sense, is it's similar to like, if you have a QA tester or, a developer, SDET on your team. Basically, if you tell them, oh, cool, it changed, but that's okay, it can be either. The AI works the same way, right? Yes, it can be a shopping cart, it can be a bag, or it can be this text box, or it can be that looking text box with pre-formed text. They're the same. It'll learn and grow to understand it can be either or. How many test iterations before training is able to reliably use the image selector? How does this deal with headless test runs? Great question. So we've done a lot of work. We have a guy on our team who also worked at Google and ML expert, and we have Tariq King as well, and a couple other folks who've been working hard on this. And so we're actually able, one of our secret sauce pieces is low data classifiers. And so we're pretty reliable as long as things aren't changing dramatically. So most web pages, it's fine. Things where it does break, just to be full transparency, is if you wanted to do a generic homepage, so like Amazon, for instance, has a carousel when you load on there, and it's always rotating its different products of the day, and it's very dynamic. So something like that is a little bit harder for us to recognize, because we have to learn it in a far more generic sense of where it is on the page, what makes this element unique, things like that. And so that one's super hard, as well as if you're doing like a game, the character that's moving around, and like a 3D game where it can start to change. The AI needs a lot of examples on that, but for most of the stuff, it just takes that one instance. If it takes multiple, you can do that in a couple training sessions. But the key thing on that is, if it's the backup, it's always just sort of that backup worst case scenario. And then if it's AI first, you can do as many training examples as you want, but you'll start to see it after a couple of runs, what it looks like. One of the challenges is handling verifying data grids with dynamic data. How close are we to getting that capability in SDK, and where does it stand in the roadmap? So as of right now, yeah, dynamic data is a challenge across the board. So if you give multiple examples, is good tie into the last question. So if we have multiple examples, so I'm trying to think like say you're an e-commerce app and you have a couple different examples with prices, and they change. So if you have, one for $9.99, one for $11.99, eventually what it'll start to learn is on that page, what makes that element unique, and where is that, what are the common components? So it's location, for instance, the fact that it starts with a dollar sign. It'll start to kind of fuzz out some of those other aspects of like, oh, the $9.99, $10.99, those pieces don't matter as much. It's, these are the core kind of components, and it starts to learn that. Now, that said, it might take a couple of examples just when it is very dynamic like that. It just has to train and understand what does that look like, and how does it handle it. It's definitely something on our roadmap for what we want to handle going forward and being better. But that's a sort of an NP complete type of problem where it's, how do you handle all unknown data? In terms of automation, and it's an unsolved problem. In terms of AI, it's actually interesting. There's a lot of examples out there where AI is kind of the only solution that can handle that. So if you think about it like a cat and a dog selector, right, as a very basic example, you don't have to show it every cat in the world that's ever existed and every sort of spot pattern for it to then know what a cat is or a dog is. It can see a couple examples and start to learn what are the properties of a cat versus a dog, and then it can see different breeds of dogs or different breeds of cats that's never seen before, and still make a very accurate guess of like, oh, this is a dog or a cat. And so that's where we want to try and take some of the technology. But doing that in a more data and dynamic data specifically type of way. How efficiently will a test AI work with Salesforce application? Multiple issues while automating a Salesforce application, best practices I should follow. I think we've looked at Salesforce from the mobile side, and it was an iframe, which is very painful to use. So using test AI from that, it can help a lot in that, because we can look at it just at the pixel level and not be bogged down by the DOM. And then we have a method where you can basically just send raw click coordinates and things like that for simplified views, and that makes it a lot faster. So it can help with that. I would have to look at sort of the exact piece. I mean, there's lots to go into that question for something like a Salesforce application. Could handle things, such as 2FA logins. That's not necessarily something we could help with, but those are the typical selectors in iframes are just a known problem inside of Selenium, Appium, and a lot of these test frameworks. Another question. So if the text label changes, we need to train again. Most likely it will require another training. It really depends how unique it is and what element. So if you're, for instance, putting the only selected the my first AI test and not the full text box in this example, right? If you're just to build it on just this small little section here, then yeah, I'd probably need to learn a little bit more. And a couple examples. If you put it as this entire, search test box, something like this, then it would learn, a lot more, because a lot more of these properties are staying the same, and it can start, and it might actually figure that out on the first time. So it really depends on how big that element is. What are the other kind of unique properties and things like that. Do you need to worry about the type of element selectors are selected, since XPath is brittle versus ID or CSS? So this is a good question. So there is one other piece I didn't quite show just for time, but so if you have your existing Selenium tag or existing Selenium test, what you can do here, we added an extra value here, so you can pass in an element name now. So you can do stuff like this, where you could call this a search box, And what that does is basically it merges the two, the AI first approach, where it's just the element name with the tag name. So now we no longer are dependent on what is this tag. This could change, to like a div or something. We would still say it's a search box. And so if it fails, we still look up on our backend and say it's a search box. The second benefit of that is we need to go AI first. So if we ran this as it stands today, the system would learn search box. And so the first time we'd run something like this, we wouldn't need to train because it's already learned that input box in this particular example is a search box. And so you can basically pass in that and have best of both worlds. It just takes a little bit more time on your test case, but we support that. Is Device Lab available? Today, we do not support a Device Lab, but we work with all the existing Device Labs that are out there, like Browser Stack, Sauce Labs, etc., or your local one. Again, we're just an additive approach to Selenium. We're not, and Appium, we're not replacing it. Can this tool handle arithmetic captchas? Unfortunately, not yet. We struggle a little bit with that ourselves. So we have some stuff internally. I'm not sure if we're quite ready to release that publicly, but we do some of our stuff that we do for data generation on this is we do test 1,000+ apps a day, and some of those have login challenges like CAPTCHA, 2FA, etc. And so we have some work on that, but it's not ready for the SDK, and it's a bit of a challenge even internally. How does Test AI handle scenarios where the same image appears multiple times on the screen? Is it possible to count them and or act upon specific instance in the repeated image? So what we do is we look at an image, and if it's repeated multiple times, we just give back the one that the AI says is the highest, the most likely to be the right one, which tends to be the one that is closest in screen coordinates or screen location to your previous one. One of our next things that we're going to be working on here in the next probably, we're halfway through Q1, so end of Q1, early Q2, is to support multiple elements. So the find elements by ID, or those sort of selectors where there would be multiple, and then we'll just return back, here's the 5 instances of search boxes or what have you, and then you programmatically can handle things from there. So you could then figure out and say, okay, what search box is the highest one, or what search box has this text inside it, things like that. Can this tool handle test cases like Google Drive, Excel, files, driver, etc.? I think if this question is around follow-up by cell by cell. So it same kind of question as before in regards to sort of that dynamic data. It'll probably take a little bit of work to handle some of those cell by cell things, but again, it's good as a backup in that case, probably not necessarily an AI first one, just because if you looked at that visually, it would take a little bit of time to kind of understand it, and there tends to be a lot more temporal or contextual information, maybe is the right way of saying it, where it's like, this cell is interesting not because of where it is on the screen or whatnot, because it it has the column header of age and the row header of Chris or something, right? And that's the thing that you actually want. And so right now we don't have an answer for that. It's somewhere on our list, but it's a little bit further down, as it's a relatively special case, and things like that tend to be a little bit better just for hard code automation today. Is uploading and downloading from web application? I think. Can the tests move from desktop to mobile browser, or would that require retraining on new endpoints? No, it can do both. It doesn't actually know, the system fundamentally doesn't know what application is the source of the data. So as long as, let's say, your search icon, your shopping carts, your whatever are the same across your desktop and mobile and web browsers, then it'll do that. But you could easily blend it where it's like a Google search browser, which then you have a Microsoft Excel, save icon, etc., and it handles all of those seamlessly. Test AI uses image-based element recognition. How well will it work on a responsive UI application? Does it require me to train? I think we've talked a little bit about those. I think the only piece I'd say is the different devices resolutions. Yes, it doesn't learn it. I had an example previously, but I can share it out after this if need be. But where we basically took an image on a phone of the Test AI demo store. It's basically a picture of an accessory jewelry thing, and we ran it on a Android phone in landscape or portrait mode, and then we ran that same test case without any retraining on an iPad landscape mode, and it was still able to execute. So different screen density, different screen size, different even dimensions of the object, and it was still able to find it. Do we support application install in Citrix machine or remote machine? As long as your existing test framework works, we work with that. So it should, as long as Selenium, Appium, whatever you're using works. Since it seems like the image processing happens in your cloud implementation, does this mean this tool cannot be used in a closed network system? As of right now, that is correct. We only support our cloud. If you want, Jeroen is on the line. He's our VP of sales. He can talk to you about an enterprise solution where this system would be able to run in your private cloud within your internal network, and we can work on gain deployment. So we support that in the enterprise piece. And that's just Kevin kind of highlighted or alluded to that piece a little bit. Yeah, so we can, that is something we can support. And then let me, so yeah, just a few other pieces since questions are over, but where we're going next is to open API and code samples. So, to the questions of around C# and some of these additional frameworks that people have, we want to just open up an API and teach you how to use it. So then at the end of the day, we just have a few commands. And so if you want to integrate this today with your specific tool set, we can handle that. We also are working on standard tests. So these are, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but things where if you don't want to have to write your whole test case out, you want to just let the AI handle all the flows and stuff like that. You can then basically pass in and say, run a search test case or run a login. Here's the credentials, and it'll just handle that execution for you. You don't have to write out the test case. And then, some work on automatic error detectors. So as we run through your application, do we detect things like issues on A11Y, console log errors, things like that, but just do it automatically for you so you can have that data. I know we're almost at time. I thought we'd end a lot sooner, but a lot of great questions. So I wanted to just say, again, thank you to everyone for staying here, and definitely stay in touch. We have a Discord community. That's the QR code for quick access if anyone wants it. Otherwise, it's sdk.test.ai/discord. It's also on the website, test.ai/SDK. But my email is chris@test.ai, and I'm also on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Chris Navarrete because there's not that many of us. Sorry, one more question. Is this tool handle window authentication? Yes, you could use Windows authentication for this with this tool. The only piece that you have to worry about in that is making sure that it can get a screenshot. There's on mobile, there's a thing called secure flag that can cause some issues for getting screenshots. I'll hand it over to Kevin.
That was impressive, Chris. I mean, the presentation, that was pretty good, but the rapid fire Q&A, that was insane. You went through a lot of questions. We show over 44 questions answered, and I think you had less than 20 minutes. So that's impressive, especially with that technical detail. So thank you, Chris. And thank you for all of the questions and the attendance today. You should be seeing right now, yeah, I know we just did the Q&A, but I have to put this slide up first because on the next slide, we have our winner for the Nintendo Switch Lite. And so just a reminder, Chris mentioned our Discord channel. And also today was all about the SDK, and any questions that were not answered, we are happy to talk to you. You know how sales are. They just love to talk about the product and pricing and any other questions that you have. So contact Jeroen and he would be happy to set up a meeting with you, or just ask all your questions in the Discord channel, and Chris would be happy to answer there as well.
Yeah, I'm very active on the Discord. So if you have technical questions or want to continue this, I'm happy to do that, or schedule just more of a nerd out call. Always happy on those.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we all love to talk about automation and the SDK and carbon and everything. So please contact us and we're happy to chat. So just briefly, the SDK is what you saw today. It's a coded solution. It enhances Selenium, Appium, future frameworks as well, because I know that there are others in the pipeline. And then if you're saying, yeah, but I don't have a framework, I want to get started, or our framework isn't working very well, we'd like to switch to something different, then we have Test AI Carbon, which is our UI or codeless solution. And you can get that for free as well at testai/download. Of course, you can just go to our website, test.ai, and you can get access to either one of those for free and get started. And as I mentioned earlier, I recommend just think of 3 test cases, get started. And it's that easy to get going. All of your questions, you can have answers in less time than it will take to set up a meeting, honestly. So go ahead and get started that way. All right, now everyone that is still on, which is just about everyone, pretty impressive, is waiting around to find out who will win this Nintendo Switch Lite. So hopefully my screen will advance to the next screen so that we can find out that Bud Lee is our winner of the Nintendo Switch Lite. So thank you everyone for joining us, and congratulations to Bud Lee. And we will be in contact with you very shortly to get the Nintendo Switch Lite sent out to you. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. We appreciate it. Tons of great questions and comments, and we look forward to meeting up with you on Discord or social media or through email or however else you want to contact us. Thank you and good luck, and have a great day and happy testing.
Thanks, everyone.